Welcome to Antidote Radio. This is Greg McCarran.
And this is Jeremy Roth-Cushel.
Okay, so Jeremy, it's been a very interesting week. One of the more, as we keep saying, I mean that's par for the course for this program now under Trump. It's been a very interesting week. That goes without saying, but
maybe the Chinese have cursed us to live in interesting times.
It's very possible. I mean, it's very possible. And you listen to people like Alex Jones and their radio shows very much pushing Steve Bannon's agenda of inciting or increased tensions with China. So, I mean, that very well could happen here pretty soon. That's a thought that you don't want to think about. But we can talk more about that another time. But it's been a very interesting week in terms of what's been going on within the, obviously with Wikileaks coming out with this entire trove of information about the CIA and some of the ways in which it is able to control and to monitor our devices. And what this week from this WikiLeaks Vault 7 was most interesting to you? What did you find? What about this? What do you see being the implications of this, and what about it stuck out to you the most?
This has resonance very much, of course, with the NSA revelations from Snowden. And we who do some analysis of deep politics have been talking about the deep state for years on end, before it was talked about in the Washington Post, have pointed out these types of things even to our friends, that the devices have back ends, that if you are really a target, then your audio, your microphone, your video, your camera can be remotely turned on or perpetually turned on by interested parties inside the intelligence apparatus. Because at this point now we have confirmation that there are more than one, and so actually in terms of looking maybe at what we have actually learned from this, is we have confirmation now that the CIA in parallel to the NSA has created as vast, or maybe even more vast, even vaster array of surveillance targeting techniques to be able to bypass, I'd say, a large majority of the Bill of Rights, to be able to target intelligence targets for whatever reason. So that actually is the bigger result of this in terms of the public's learning, is that the CIA, even though it supposedly focused on direct human intelligence, that's where it really gets its original mission, was in doing actual human intelligence and then analysis in order to give the president the kind of decision-making capacity that he or she would need. But of course, from their very beginning, the CIA has had basically a vice grip on the executive branch. He who controls the information basically controls the destiny of the nation. And when you combine the control of information with the combine of dark arts, black operations, and the ability to run assets and to do things like false flags, which was, of course, one of the other revelations of this Vault 7 leak, was that the CIA, of course, has the capacity to run cyber attacks, cyber snooping, and create layers of false flag evidence, basically dropping Russian signatures along the way, for example, that type of thing. So there is some interesting stuff to this, and because if a lot of people were taking the angle back during the Snowden revelation that at some level you do have an intra-administrative or an intra-executive squabble of some sort, potentially, or jousting for funds and importance between the NSA and the CIA, and that at some level Snowden is an admitted CIA trained intelligence officer or agent of some sort.
Who's Alan Hamilton?
And then in intelligence parlance, you would actually say that he was a CIA operative, then sheep dipped into the NSA, and then ultimately sheep dipped into the corporate sector in terms of Booz Allen Hamilton. That really is the order of his disclosed service and employment. So that means really he's once a CIA guy, always a CIA guy. I don't think he actually turncoated against the CIA and became NSA and then really sort of went off the reservation to Booz Allen Hamilton. No, so there was that evidence that the Snowden leaks were some sort of pushback from the CIA against the NSA. And then learning what we learned in terms of the raw intelligence, mass surveillance relationship between the NSA and not only the Five Eyes of the sort of British Commonwealth, but also directly with the Israelis and the Israelis' NSA Unit 8200, which I believe is directly in military intelligence in Israel, that was also exposed to some extent. So that there was that aspect, but of course the other part of it, the really deep analysis of people should go, if they're interested in a really deep analysis and the really dark interpretation that to my mind is clearly part of what's operating here at the very least, is go look at Scott Creighton's analysis, the Willie Loman Everyman blog, who from the very beginning has been doing a deep and difficult analysis of Snowden, and then eventually Greenwald, and now Vault 7 and WikiLeaks. And he uses a range of different sources, and people like the head of Cryptome, John Young, who's been quoted talking about that WikiLeaks has a lot of the qualities of an intelligence organization. They resist transparency. There's a sort of like a hierarchy of access of some sort. So there's a dark administrative guise behind WikiLeaks. And of course, even early on in Julian Assange's career with WikiLeaks, two things early on are very important, I believe, in terms of potentially seeing the context of the Vault 7 leaks. Is one, when allegedly Julian Assange was asked about September 11th and 9/11 truth, and he said, well, there's too many real conspiracies for us to focus on to deal with that type of thing. And of course, other than some 9/11 text messages that were interesting in terms of some of the details, lower details of September 11th, nothing WikiLeaks has released has actually shook the foundation of the 21st century's overarching supreme meta-narrative, which of course is that the war on terror was actually some type of response to an external, a series of external attacks by these rogue, dark Islamist organizations that somehow slipped out of control of the intelligence agencies that they were started by, in terms of Al Qaeda at the very least, and very likely ISIS also. That has never been put on trial by the dumps of WikiLeaks. And in fact, in the lead up to the release of this Vault 7, there were a lot of people doing an analysis. I thought it was really interesting. They were doing who is Vault 7, what is Vault 7, and doing all these interesting graphics. And it did seem there was some suggestion that it might have to do something to do with September 11th. Maybe that's down the road. They said this is only 1% of what they have. why, if someone really wanted transparency and more importantly, justice in the world, I would think that some hard evidence about September 11th treason that shows that the reason for the burgeoning police state and surveillance state that's becoming overarching in a global fashion right now is not as a response to terrorism, but as part and parcel of the terror wars. But this is one of the major reasons that September 11th was done, was to enact an omnipotent, omnipresent deep state. And then geopolitically, of course, to tie that directly into the expanding global Zionist deep state in terms of protecting the narrative that it is the Islamic world that is the major and long-term threat for the 21st century. So that. Just in wrapping up this sort of deeper, darker narrative in terms of what Vault 7 might represent is the idea of the boiling of the frog is one way of thinking about it, the revelation of the method, the opting in of your victim, because of course many of us were saying we were telling people this is what was going on, that there were back ends in the operating systems, and of course I don't even believe that this is showed up in Vault 7, but of course it's been written into the hardware structure, especially even all the way back to the advent of the electrical and the phone grid. You can know that the national security apparatus in the United States of America has been fully utilizing those kind of grids to their advantage for decades and decades and decades now, not just with the advent of the smartphone. But the smartphone represents the perfect intelligence device. The target of the intelligence purchases it and pays for it themselves, opts in with contracts and gives their permission for it. And, this does go back to right after September 11th, John Poindexter, I think his name is, right, from Iran-Contra infamy, said he had this idea for the Total Information Awareness Bureau, directorate of some sort that had the all-seeing eye as the badge, and even a lot of Beltway bandit people got nervous by that kind of iconography, and that was rejected. Yeah. And so it does look like that. Then the end around, of course, was through the corporate sector, was through the Facebooks, was the creation of the opt-in, was through the Twitter, was through the Samsung and through the iPhones, and you have to opt in now in order for convenience, for the power of social media, for the power of pervasive communications. You now have thus also signed up for your movements and for your words and for video of your life to also be being put into deep storage in Bluffdale, Utah, and apparently probably in Amazon servers too, in terms of their relationship with the CIA. So those are some aspects to this Vault 7 release. It is a revelation of the method. It's more important than even privacy is public courage, is the desire and the necessity to have conversations of public interest and intent out in the open. And of course, it makes it even more and more relevant. And so some people will now hold their tongues more and not say things knowing that it could be put on some type of deep document, dossier against every single American and every single human being to be parallelly constructed against them in the future, whether it's in local court or per their employer, and they will hold their tongues. Other people will escalate their peaceful patriotism and bring the treason and bring the sedition that is represented by these violations of massive parts of our basic founding principles in terms of the Bill of Rights out into the open to be dissected and to be bound by the truth so that may we actually move towards justice, peace, and then freedom.
You made several great points there. I appreciate the breakdown of the for our audience of all that's going on with this WikiLeaks dump. And by the way, we want to thank the people who are now listening to us on via No Lies Radio. Appreciate your support there. So we now have two ways to reach you via the SoundCloud page and also via No Lies Radio. We're greatly appreciative for that opportunity, by the way. Now, with regards to this, you mentioned Assange and September 11th. I think that, there's always a chance of the benefit of the doubt, and we can always be proven wrong. But based on what I've seen, I'm not going to hold my breath waiting for Assange and WikiLeaks to come out and start putting out inconvenient facts about what happened on that day. But real quick before we move off this topic, the way I analyze events like these WikiLeaks dumps or the WikiLeaks role in putting out the Clinton emails, and that's a topic that we're going to continue to come back to at some point. There's also some really interesting stuff that came out this week about Roger Stone's relationship, what his relationship may or may not be with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, and how he may figure into that whole thing. But when I look at these issues, and we'll be going back to this stuff in the future, by the way, but when I look at these issues, I look at it not from so much of what is being said or what is being exposed, but I look at it in terms of what the bigger meaning is for this. What is the what are the reasons for this? Why is this information about Hillary Clinton coming out right now? We have conclusions about that, which we've talked about on this program, that it was done deliberately to benefit Donald Trump, I think. But in terms of this, I guess I'll get two quick comments on two quick things real quick before we move on to the next topic. But what do you see as being the reason for this coming out right now? And also, do you think there's any validity to the idea that WikiLeaks could very well perhaps be an Israeli asset in some way in terms of how it does not really delve into the Israeli role in any of this stuff, including within the spying and surveillance communities?
Yes, well, this was the other aspect of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks that I forgot to follow up with, is that early on, such a shining example of a truth teller as Zbigniew Brzezinski was on PBS, I believe, right after the original big, I believe it was the Manning document dumps, saying that this looked like the kind of situation where an intelligence organization, and it seemed like he was implying a foreign intelligence organization to the U.S., could cede, he said, could cede and direct or point or shape these dumps in certain ways. And clearly that is, if you actually look at the contours of what has, a lot of what's been released, especially when it comes to the Middle East and the wars and again, go look at Scott Creighton, Willie Loman, Everyman blog analysis from back during the original WikiLeaks dumps, and he just goes down the checklist in terms of what was actually exposed in the Manning leaks, and it was like, oh, knew that. Next one, propaganda. Pakistani ISI and Hamid Gul's involved in protecting Bin Laden. Propaganda. Okay, there are secret American special forces assassinating people on the ground. Knew that. And then when you combine that with the there was no. As far as I know, there was no substance about the Israeli involvement in the disruption of Iraqi cultural life, where this really was a divide and conquer operation that was very clearly called for in the Clean Break paper in '96. And so there was nothing on that account, and then later on there was leaks that had to do with a lot of the Arab leadership just showing their sort of splitting in a sort of like a social fashion almost, the Arab world from the Iranian world. And who would that benefit? And even I haven't yet found it, but there were, early on, Julian Assange supposedly publicly showed affinity with Netanyahu. And was checking in intensely with the Israeli government about some of the leaks that they were doing. And really, you haven't really seen anything that speaks in that direction. So that is an issue. And then of course this brings into question RT, because RT America at the very least is very much aligned with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. And so
the progressive media in general here in the West is very much aligned with Assange, even after the solid that Assange did for the Trump campaign.
A good point. And so this then also plays right back into the issue of the Russia cutout aspect. And so that's what's so interesting about this, is that in terms of the Trump, the signs that Trump is of a Zionist mob background with direct ties to Israeli intelligence, there's this cutout layer and this Russian narrative that even his alleged opponents are playing up to large part. So who knows what the consciousness is behind that. But this then also plays in relationship to some of these, the questions around the leaks surrounding the Clinton-Trump campaign and Guccifer, and is he actually an independent person, or is he some type of asset of the Russian government? And so it's interesting that this Russian-Assange relationship is similar to this Russian-Trump relationship in terms of leaving out this massive silent elephant in the room partner, Netanyahu in Israel.
Oh, so true. And this is very vitally important. And I'll say real quick that we're not, I'm not asserting, we're not saying as a fact that all of this was being done for the benefit of Israel with WikiLeaks and Trump getting in, and what happened with the Russian connections and really being Israeli connections. We're not saying that as fact, but I think it's very, very important to continue to bring this topic up, because so many, even within alternative circles, are unwilling to discuss this. I think because there's a fear of getting into this topic because of the tabooness of talking about Zionist influence. It just goes beyond what Israel's doing within its own borders. So I think it's very vitally important to continue to follow up on these leads here with the WikiLeaks Israeli connections. Very interesting, going along with Donald Trump and the fact that Trump is a very big is very much a blessing to the Israeli right, which saw Obama and the Democrats, and sees the Democratic left, or the West, the establishment left in the West, the EU-led liberal wing of as being a threat to what they believe, the Israeli right believes, is its well-being. And then you see this collusion with the right-wing media in Israel, Breitbart, which is essentially a creation of the Likud in Israel. And all these connections with Donald Trump, and the WikiLeaks connection coming into this as well. WikiLeaks really playing a huge role in getting Trump elected, with people like surrogates like Sean Hannity in the media constantly propping up WikiLeaks. This is something that needs to be discussed, and it's something that we cannot shy away from, because as more and more leads, as you continue to look into this information, it seems that more and more of it leads back to Israel, and this is something that has to be discussed and we cannot shy away from.
And Greg, I want to make one last point about the obvious who and why agenda that is being served potentially by these latest WikiLeaks and Vault 7, that ties back into another agenda apparently being served by the Trump administration. And that is that in this, the other major part that was exposed in this Vault 7 leaks that we forgot to mention was that the CIA had allegedly lost control of all of these tools. So all of these tools have thus been outsourced de facto to not only the intelligence agencies of the world, but also the deep corporate sector, and what is really the global deep state, which operates outside of, in relationship with the deep government. And so, of course, this even going back to Snowden releases, the legislative response to the outing of the NSA violations of major parts of the Bill of Rights was to then recorporatize the process of surveillance. And you got the alleged libertarians like Rand Paul, I believe, to support the idea of the problem was not the surveillance itself, but the problem was that it was the government doing it. So let's keep it only in the Facebooks and the Verizons and the Booz Allen Hamiltons, and then everything will be okay. And of course, that's what's being hinted at in this Vault 7 release.
Hey, it's the free market, man. Free market.
The government is incompetent to hold the secrets, but also de facto that the entirety of the deep corporate world already has this, and in many ways, it's at some level what's being read into this is that this is the end of national governance or national governments to be able to actually rein in and hold the sovereignty and dignity of their own citizens' interests in protection. So that is the other part of this, and of course that ties directly into the corporatist element of the Trump administration, where there's a lot of movement towards putting more resources towards the private contractors. So I believe that is another piece of that, and of course in that interface again is also the movement from Silicon Valley towards Tel Aviv, and the intense rise of the Israeli tech sector that we've spoken about in different moments, but especially after September 11th. And Naomi Klein's chapter on it in Disaster Capitalism, The Shock Doctrine, a book about disaster capitalism, talks about this. But anybody who's in IT knows that Israeli companies are the major companies when it comes to things like firewalls, security, that type of thing, and major infrastructure around the United States of America is now being managed by Israeli contractors. And at some level, you see this. I believe this is also a move potentially by the Israeli technical deep state to create a DARPA 2.0, you might call it, where DARPA 1.0 created the hardware backbone infrastructure in terms of our communication technology, so that the U.S. deep state was hardwired in from the beginning, and the movement of chip manufacturers and Facebook and relationships with Google to Tel Aviv, I believe, are indicators that the Israeli deep technical state is making a major play to be at the center of global DARPA 2.0.
It makes perfect sense, and you're making some great points about the idea that it's just the it's the government that's carrying out all the surveillance, and once again it sounds like another example of, as long as our free market God does it, then hey, let the free market do whatever it wants, and that also seems to be very much be a part of this whole. Some of maybe the more libertarian-minded oppositionists. I'm not saying there aren't principled libertarians who oppose this. Obviously there are, but I think that may have a role to do with it, in the corporatization of the Trump administration, kind of the privatizing of a lot of this stuff. And they very well could be seeing that. That very well could be the role of somebody like a Feinberg of DynCorp infamy, and coming in and restructuring the intelligence agencies. I'm not sure if that's still on the table, but.
That's a very interesting question, though, because that would tie in very specifically. I think you're right in terms of this external contractor, corporatist direct oversight of the intelligence apparatus, and plus, it's in those types of in between transnational corporation bodies where you can really sort of make a full-on conjunction of different governments' intelligence apparati into our own, most specifically, probably in this case, Israel, but not limited to that. And then, of course, that relates also to, I read that Assange was proposing that he was going to help the Silicon Valley tech companies to rebuild the technology to be not susceptible to the CIA's technology. So who's it going to be susceptible to?
Great points. We're going to be coming back to this topic here, no question, here in the future. But I wanted to move on to another topic of particular interest this week to me, and that is an open letter going around that is opposing the cancellation of a lecture by a progressive journalist, Rania Khalek, who was invited to speak to the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill campus by Students for Justice in Palestine. And in a nutshell, her speech was canceled by this organization because of her views on the conflict in Syria, which go against the narrative that favors such bastions of humanity, wink wink, as the White Helmets, the Oscar award-winning White Helmets, and their awesome humanitarian work in helping save the people of Syria from this evil despot, Bashar Assad. Sarcasm, obviously. But so anyway, in light of this event, a number of very prominent progressive journalists and activists have come together to sign a petition or a statement opposing Rania Khalek's her speech being canceled by the University of North Carolina. They're coming out in favor of free speech and against the blacklisting of activists and writers. And some of the names on this are very interesting. Ali Abu Nima, Noam Chomsky, obviously we know who he is. Norman Solomon, very anti-9/11 truth pundit who actually resigned from the board of Project Censored for taking a stand on 9/11 truth. Medea Benjamin of Code Pink signed this. Max Blumenthal, Abby Martin of Telesur signed this statement. The Empire Files. Kevin Gustola and Benjamin Norton, who's written an article equating Assad defenders with neo-Nazis and Holocaust deniers. There's a lot of hypocrisy involved with this. Some of the people who signed this petition. I take two things from this petition. Number one, it is good that this could start a conversation about free speech within progressive circles. But the other thing that gets to me is the blatant hypocrisy of so many of these signees who have attacked people for basically saying the same things about Syria. I mean, Rania Khalek, who's now under fire for her views on Syria, has taken shots at Cynthia McKinney for saying a lot of the same things she said about Syria. Max Blumenthal, who of course father played a preeminent role in the destruction of Libya, attempted to blacklist the Syrian nun, Mother Agnes Mariam, who questioned the official narrative of the chemical attacks in Syria in 2013 by trying to successfully, along with a couple other, Jeremy Scahill and Owen Jones of The Guardian, having her removed from an anti-war conference for asserting that the Syrian government was not responsible for the chemical attack that nearly started a war there in 2013. And in addition, some of these people on this list, like Blumenthal and Ali Abu Nima, of course, we all know Noam Chomsky's history of disparaging September 11th and JFK advocates, although he's never come out against their free speech. We know his history. But Abu Nima and Chomsky, they both openly supported an effort to blacklist Alison Weir, that was led by Jewish Voice for Peace. And even last year when Alison Weir was when the Students for Justice in Palestine chapter at the University of Stanford opposed Alison Weir at an event because of her views on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Ali Abu Nima made statements, who's on this list of signatories, made statements supporting the Stanford Students for Justice in Palestine against Alison Weir. So while we're seeing this is an important topic that is being raised, free speech on campus and against blacklisting of activists within progressive circles, there's also a lot of hypocrisy amongst many of the signees of this statement.
Good points. Yeah, and I concur with your statement that this is could be a good thing to get people to start talking about such matters as blacklisting of activists, intellectual suppression, that type of thing. This is a very important topic. And I also concur with your assertion that there's a lot of hypocrisy here. And there's not only hypocrisy, but at some level it's like there's virtue signaling years too late, after it's become politically feasible and convenient to do so, is what it looks like to me. And that it really was the people like Cynthia McKinney early on, like, you know, before Libya, and then definitely in the beginnings of Syria, who were willing to go on the ground and point out that this did not have anything to do with the cover it was given, which is almost always the cover that aggressive warfare is given during democratic regimes, of humanitarian warfare, the support of democratic movements to overthrow dictators and such thing. And then you pointed out one of these people, Max Blumenthal, who's not only intensely, virulently anti 9/11 truth, which I've made the case before, and I'd make it again, that being anti 9/11 truth is also being virulently anti-Semitic in a very material fashion. And the fact that the 90% of the Arab Muslim world knows September 11th was blamed on Arab Muslim people and likely done by elements of Israel and the U.S. And so anyone who is attacking those who are trying to de-scapegoat the 21st century of the if there's a group of people, a Semitic group of people that have had large portions of lives destroyed in many in more and more countries, then it would be the Arab Muslim world. And to be anti 9/11 truth is to be virulently anti-Semitic. That's what I believe at this point. Okay, I understand people who don't want to give it capital or don't have other battles to fight. And Noam Chomsky has made that point before, that he just, why should I be attacked because I have different I have different values about what's politically important. But of course, that's not actually what's going on here. These are people who actually go out of their way to attack things like September 11th truth that could actually be the philosopher's stone and the Achilles heel of the empire, and deconstructing the long war, the endless war. And back to Max Blumenthal, he actually played some type of intellectually material role, whether he conscious or not, in terms of the escalation of the attack on Libya into Syria. And we know that from some of the leaks, that his father was definitely playing a role, was guiding Hillary Clinton in terms of talking point propaganda around Libya. And and people like Jeremy Scahill, who, like you said, attacked Mother
Agnes Merriam,
and refused to be seen on stage with her. He participated in this kind of blacklisting, and so this is some sort of virtue signaling, a dollar short and a day late. At the same time, it does bring up a key issue about people being targeted for speech, especially in this area about Palestinian solidarity and how that intersects with American foreign policy and the purview of the Israeli security state, which Syria is right there. And it's good that Rania Khalek has sort of made her way towards towards the truth of this matter. And so let's urge people to go further. Let's urge people to look into the way that aggressive war is always launched, which is by some sort of deep deception. And in terms of the long war, September 11th is still on the table, and I'd like for people who to disparage 9/11 truth to go to at least taking it off the table, being silent on it if they haven't done their research and they don't know what they're talking about really, and for people who are silent on it to get into the arena and put it into the whole category of state crimes against democracy that are the rule rather than the exception when it comes to the empire.
Yeah, when you say that, we're not talking about, milquetoast half-truth 28 pages. We're talking about actual facts that actually get into the meat and potatoes of what probably really happened on September 11th. So, when we say, stop censoring the truth, stop being closed-minded, and stop being hostile to the truth about September 11th, we're not talking about the half-truths that the establishment, media, and government are willing to let out there that, Saudi Arabia funded hijackers, or that Saudi Arabia and the Bush administration had a close relationship. No, we're talking about actually getting into the real meat and potatoes of what happened on September 11th. But these people, I find, in addition to the like Rania Khalek, like Max Blumenthal, like Benjamin Norton, who wrote this article that was deleted from his website but is available on the Internet Archive, taking the views of a few people, a few of them who we actually know quite well, who are really good, great activists, by the way, and use their words to paint anybody who supports Assad or defends the Assad regime against the wonderful humanitarian rebels that are fighting for freedom, the revolutionaries, as being anti-Semites and neo-Nazis. People like that who have rebranded themselves along with Rania Khalek, I think they have to be looked at very suspiciously. And of course, with Max Blumenthal kind of leading this effort, and we talked about this in our previous show where we went into Max Blumenthal's deception regarding September 11th. And I think these people need to be looked at very suspiciously in any efforts they make to try to make inroads. I'm not saying to not praise them or to give them credit when they're correct about something, like in this case with Rania Khalek, but I think these people need to be looked at very warily, and honestly, until they start making amends for some things they've said or done in the past, or until they show a willingness to really start to be less hostile towards these other causes, particularly September 11th that we've talked about, I think they need to be looked at with very suspiciously, and their motives need to be questioned at all fronts, pretty much.
That's definitely one key piece of this, and that has to do with we the people's counterintelligence awareness, our ability to suss out the intelligence operations and potential operatives that are being run against us potentially in our midst. And of course, this is a very difficult topic because an intelligence operative is almost never going to be proven. There's very little paper trail. And it does know, and that was shown to be one of the tactics of COINTELPRO was for the FBI through certain channels to accuse an activist of being FBI. And to get people infighting, and that was part of the way that they, including other ways that they helped destroy the Black Panthers. So at the same time, I would say that to me, the even more important thing that this type of conversation calls for is for a rise of a culture of firmly committed, passionate, open disagreement, dialogue, discourse, and debate, so that the answer to this type of scenario is, of course, for people to disagree with each other as openly and publicly as possible. And in some way, I see this as feeding into the larger political machinations of the oligarchical power structure, where we've been divided and conquered as a people at some level by creating massive resentment across the political spectrum, but also by herding us into even allowing us to choose for ourselves to be herded into our own echo chambers, and where disagreement and debate doesn't happen except on certain Facebook channels and stuff like that. When was the last time you actually really heard a deep, committed debate in a public forum in person with maybe more than two angles, and where the audience was not only invited to ask questions, but was invited to supply facts or analysis that might have been missed by some of the speakers. So really, I think this kind of thing calls for more and more openness, more and more speech, and anyone trying to thinks that the answer to our conundrum is to make sure that someone can't speak. I just think that's completely wrong, and of course this ties back into our conversations about the relationship to Milo and the alt-right, and once again it's these deep state crimes against democracy that are the marker, not only the marker. Those who will not speak of it, it is a litmus test of sorts about whether you're being willing, especially at this day and age where it's. If the Washington Post can talk about the deep state, then leftist activists should be able to also. And so that's my call in this scenario, is for there to be. I'm calling for Noam Chomsky to actually debate Kevin Barrett about September 11th in the public on stage. And then also for there to be some type of equality here in terms of the kind of speech that you defend. And yes, Noam Chomsky, for Noam Chomsky's defense, he seems that he is always, when the question is put to him, he always supports free speech. At the same time, where is Noam Chomsky and the rest of these people on the case of Professor Anthony Hall being taken out of his tenured position over the course of the last year by B'nai B'rith, basically a lobby of a foreign intelligence service or a Zionist global network of some sort. Joy Kariga in Oberlin. And we're actually going to do a panel at the Left Forum this June in New York City with Anthony Hall, with Joy Kariga, with me talking about our Kansas City library case, and being moderated by Kevin Barrett, I believe. So this is the type of thing I want to see. Ali Abu Nima and Reza Aslan and Abby Martin and Noam Chomsky and Mark Albert and Norman Solomon. I want to see a statement on the end Medea Benjamin on the end of tenure in the Professor Hall case. Or the clearly sort of, there's some type of Judeo-supremacist thing going on with the African-American Professor Joy Kariga, in terms of, and that's tied into her political commitments about her anti-Zionism at some level. And then of course back to our experience at the Kansas City Public Library, and that now there is some evidence that all aspects of the First Amendment were being attacked that evening, including religion, and that I was being questioned, at least after the fact, by the Israeli-trained Fusion Center liaison from the Kansas City Police Department about whether I was really a Jew. Because some of these activists claim to be Jews but aren't really Jews. So, when you tie this into to what's going on in Israel in terms of their law that was passed to basically ban anybody who agrees with international law from coming into the country. And there's some vital conversations in this area of the critique of Zionism. What is the relationship of Jewishness and the power of Jewish cultural networks in relationship to suppressing certain vital aspects, especially on the left in terms of foreign policy. These are very important questions that need to be discussed by all people that say that they're for justice.
Absolutely, and I'll say this: the free speech ball. I mean, we're not the ones suppressing free speech. It's not the horrible truthers. It's not the evil anti-Semites, the ones that are accused of being anti-Semites on false premises, anti-Jew or whatever. We're not the ones who are suppressing free speech here. We're not the ones who are trying to keep people from talking. It's the people on the other side who are trying to keep voices from being heard, and that's what we're fighting against. And we're challenging these people, hey, you know what? Look, if you truly value the truth, if you're an honest person if you're an honest person who has legitimate beliefs and is actually coming from a place of good conscience and good faith, then you shouldn't be afraid of debate. And hopefully at the left forum, a strong statement can be made about that, because I know that's a conference where increasingly there's been inroads coming in of some of the more honest activists, and that trend looks to be continuing this year. You made a statement when you were in the last statement about how activists or agents very rarely actually are ever exposed as far as like proof of their agency. But I think in the case of somebody like Max Blumenthal, you could put the pieces together and kind of come up with your own conclusion. Or in the case of the person who we're going to talk about here briefly for our final topic of the day, and that's David Duke and his history. The whole statement of being an agent and whether or not that can be proven or not. I think in some cases, in the case of David Duke, you can certainly look at his past and kind of draw a conclusion. But David Duke is somebody that we kind of looked at, both of us, I think, looked at as just kind of a non-factor, somebody who wasn't very important, who was just a guy who was just there, he wasn't anybody of importance. But then we saw during the election during the lead up to the election when Donald Trump was asked to disavow his support and kept getting asked about it over and over again. It became clear to us after the election, and we saw the role of David Duke in this new alt-right with people like Richard Spencer and Andrew Anglin of the Daily Stormer, that this is actually a very important element in getting Donald Trump elected, having this base of like these alt-right people like David Duke behind Donald Trump. And in many ways, David Duke strikes me as being like a Noam Chomsky type figure for the alt-right, the guy who has been like identified by the media and the establishment as like the leader, the face of this movement. And you look at his history, though, there's a long line of activity there over the course of 5 decades, constant media coverage and being promoted in many different cases over the course of 5 decades, and plus some things he was involved in with the alleging being involved with the Air America in Vietnam, the Dominican Operation Red Dog operation, and somebody like him who we previously viewed as being somebody who was not a non-factor. It looks very much like this man was way more important of a person than we ever thought he was, and that his impact on our discourse is much more consequential than we ever really knew. Got about 6 minutes left. What are your thoughts on David Duke, and what do you make of his impact on our discourse and on the Donald Trump movement?
Yes, I mean, I think some people on the left would hear us compare David Duke to being the Noam Chomsky of the right, and they would fall over. But really, when you analyze it, there is this sort of strange relationship there. He's very David Duke brags about how widely read he is around the world, and Noam Chomsky is widely recognized as the most read intellectual alive. Of course, David Duke, in my mind, seems to overemphasize Jewish power, or everything's only about Jewish power, and everything is from an ethno division kind of perspective, and at the same time he misses key false flags apparently that are obviously have a strong Zionist component to them, such as September 11th, and then Noam Chomsky, he seems to underplay the role of Jewish power in everything, while missing key false flags that have a critical Zionist component like September 11th. Noam Chomsky is famous for poo-pooing what he calls the Israeli lobby hypothesis, while missing the fact that Chomsky himself is a Zionist of sort, right? He has a certain key position in the construction of the left mythical narrative about deep state events from the Kennedy assassination to September 11th, which coincidentally also have a very strong Israeli component to them, and that can be discussed at another time. But Duke also, I sort of really noticed him when he went on when Alex Jones decided to please his sort of like anti-Zionist all the way to Jew-hating audience by having on their man David Duke. And I always thought it was really very suspicious in a way, in terms of the way that he got destroyed in that debate, and at the same time sort of like reaffirmed Duke's ethnic analysis in a way. And then also, as I pointed out when I called into his show, is if you want to actually deal with talking about maybe Jewish power, the Zionist power configuration in a more of a ecumenical or uniting or non-racist or at least non-racial way, why wouldn't you have on someone like Dr. Kevin Barrett or Christopher Bolin to talk about the September 11th in a very geopolitical way? And still, those people have never been on there. And so, to me, David Duke is basically a toxic mimic of an anti-Zionist under the guise of a white nationalist anti-Jew. And you're right. Like, we noticed that Trump took a key moment to not separate himself from David Duke. And I was like, no way, David. I thought David Duke was just sort of like this guy that they brought on to sort of smear people. But it really he was a key icon of the alt-right, some part of the alt-right component that was a key part of the cultural and electoral movement behind Trump, and continues to be the key, sort of fake opposition, I would say, I would assert, in terms of trying to make the analysis of the Zionist power configuration to be an ethnic one at its root.
Absolutely, and Duke, it's funny, he even took it a step further and announced that he was running for Senate in Louisiana, running on Donald Trump's ticket, basically. I mean, I remember listening to his radio show, he was imploring his listeners to donate, and basically almost equating the cause of, well, do I have enough support to run, with the idea of fundraising. It's like, well, if I raise enough funds, maybe I'll make a run for Senate. Then he gets like 3% of the vote, and there's a debate where he makes a complete rear end of himself, where he's asked the question about his arrest for tax related issues back in the lead up to the Iraq War, and he fit on stage and ends up getting like 3% of the vote. That to me seems like it was very orchestrated as well. And now Duke, somehow in his analysis of the Jewish deep state that he continually goes on about, somehow Breitbart and the controlled right apparatus around Trump and all these orthodox hardcore Zionists that are surrounding Donald Trump, somehow Breitbart media made in Israel, somehow all these people, no, that's not part of the Jewish deep state. No, the Gateway pundit who he gets his information about for voter fraud, which he claims got him banned from Twitter temporarily. Oh, that's not part of the Jewish deep state. No, that's a perfectly legitimate outlet that's fighting the oppression of our people. And real quick, it's also very interesting that the Young Turks had him on, but they won't have somebody like Kevin Barrett on. Got a minute left. Do you have a final statement?
Yeah, so Duke gets endless play on mainstream television and all the progressives who talk about him, talk to him, that type of thing. But I think we need to begin our analysis in terms of the right-controlled opposition at this point seems to be sort of hung between a figure like Alex Jones and a figure like David Duke. And, in the middle of that, there's a whole missing piece of a deconstruction of the oligarchical power structure that is either missed or is overemphasized in a certain sort of ethno-supremacist or ethnocentric way. But we're going to continue to try to bring you the antidote, upping the ante and providing some analytical solutions to these fake conundrums that have been presented to us. So thank you very much. Thank you, Greg, for holding it down, and thank you to No Lies Radio for hosting us. And we'll see you all